Firas Zhabi, what are you doing? Making us all discuss this stuff. It's uncomfortable. I don't like it. Calling people out. My name is Bill Jones. I'm the head instructor of Top Level Martial Arts in beautiful downtown Cuyahoga Falls. Black belt under Master Pedro Sauer. You're watching Professor's Corner. Thanks for tuning in. Guys, the other day I discussed Firas Zhabi's appearance on the Joe Rogan Podcast, and I talked about what he had said specifically about schools with attendance policies and such, and had to relate it, of course, just to the Pedro Sauer Association, because that's who my experience is with, right? But I also wanted to talk about the rest of what he said. A lot of people heard that and took offense to it, and I didn't take offense to it. I just wanted to set the record straight. But he was 100% right in why he brought it up. And I'll explain what I mean. He talked about karate and how in the old days, and when I say the old days, I'm talking like the late 70s, early 80s, people were afraid of people who did karate. Like, you did not want to fight those people. And there's videos that still surface of how tough some of these guys were. They would come in and someone would fight them, and I mean, they knew how to fight. Why? Because they actually practiced fighting. And I'm not talking about, let's get rid of this whole mindset of, kata-ing moves and stuff like that. Like, oh, well, they would just set moves and block and punch. They actually practiced fighting. They understood angles. They understood how not to get hit because they would actually fight with one another. And there's still schools that do that. Let's be real clear. Those still exist. One of the ones I came up in was definitely a fighting school, especially with Pukulan Kung Fu. I've met Kung Fu guys that, like, you don't want to mess with them. Like, they know how to fight. They're not just in there just looking fancy and just moving around. They are actually hitting each other hard and training to fight. And that's how Jiu-Jitsu used to be. And I want to go back to a story, again, talking about how I came up in Jiu-Jitsu, because I came up in very much what you would call an MMA gym. When I trained, it was not just not uncommon, it was just part of the class that you would put on gloves and you would train and you would hit each other. You'd start standing, punching, takedowns, work it all. It was basically MMA. And that's just how I was brought up in Jiu-Jitsu. Now, I don't do that all the time with my students because I recognize that not everybody wants to get hit in the face. And I do have a clientele to cater to, so we do a lot more of the grappling and a lot less of the striking. But with that said, one of my other instructors, his name is Brian Mlynarczyk. So when I came up through, one of my instructors was Tony Rinaldi. His co-owner in the school was Brian Mlynarczyk. Both phenomenal martial artists. And I remember talking to Brian, I was a purple belt at the time, about like what it took to get to blue belt and what it took, like his views on these kinds of things. And he looked and he's like, yeah, I know there's a curriculum and everything. He goes, but that aside, blue belt, you're just a genuinely tough human being. And I think that's a really good way to look at it. That's a really good criteria to look at it. And moreover, if you go back on the internet and type BJJ versus, and you'll see, people of all different ranks kind of taking all these challenge fights against other styles. Blue belts versus black belts in karate, or and so forth and so on. And I keep saying karate. I'm using that as a very generic term. So if you study a specific type of karate, and you don't take offense to it. I'm not talking bad about karate. Again, I'm a third dan in karate. I love karate just as much as anything else. Okay, so. But it's just the generic term that I'm using for traditional martial arts. But you'd see it all over the place, these challenge matches. And people would take them and see if they could win. And that was not uncommon. It was not uncommon for jiu-jitsu personnel or jiu-jitsu-eros to take these matches. Now, that was back in a time when everybody was trying to prove that jiu-jitsu is effective, that it's actually a martial art, not just two people rolling around on the ground. As an example of that, someone sent me a video the other day of some guy trying to tackle another one, and the other guy puts him in a headlock and takes him down, and the dude just starts grabbing his balls while after the takedown, the guy's like, let go, and starts like punching the guy in the head and stuff. And eventually is literally begging for the guy to let go of his balls. And the guy's like, the video was titled like something like, "This is why BJJ doesn't work." And it's like, none of that was BJJ. Just like when they got to the ground, the guy started punching. Like, that wasn't boxing either. You could say the same thing. Look, boxing doesn't work. He's punching him and he didn't let go of his balls. Like, that's not anything. Those are two completely untrained guys, fighting like idiots, and one has no idea what to do. Like, you put your arm between the legs of someone who knows what they're doing, they're going to choke you until you're unconscious. So, just like if I stood up with any proficient boxer, amateur, whatever, they're going to hit me until I get knocked out. But that was the criteria for blue belt. Genuinely tough human being. So as we went further, I was like, okay, well then, what about me? At the time I was a purple belt. What do you think about a purple belt? Like, what's that? And he goes, well, you're genuinely tough. He goes, you know how to take punches, you know how to give some punches, and your strategy's better. You're just more technical. You know more moves, and you can set them up. I was like, oh, okay. Well, what about a brown belt? He goes, same thing, just better. Well, what about a black belt? Same thing, just even better. And I want to ask, and I mean, this is a genuine conversation I want to have, because this is what I was recently at the Pedro Sauer camp, and Professor Jeff Curran. If you don't know who Jeff Curran is, just Google Jeff Curran. He's got a crap ton of MMA fights. He's put people in the UFC. He's phenomenal. And Professor Curran was talking to everybody about, a lot of the jiu-jitsu that's out there where people are like afraid to roll. They're afraid just to roll with somebody else, let alone fight somebody. And he wants to get back to the type of jiu-jitsu where, you're in a big group of people, you go to a seminar, and at the seminar you want to roll. You want to train with these people. You want to see how you do. And how many seminars do you go to now that people at the end of it just kind of pack up and leave? They're just done. Like, okay, we learned our moves. Like, how are you going to get good at those moves if you don't even try them? What are you going to do? You think you're going to remember them the next day? Probably not. So, you've got to be trying these things and be setting up for drills. And that's a call out to a lot of people teaching seminars. How many drills are you putting? Are you just teaching, like just regurgitating moves for 3 hours or 2 hours or whatever it is? Or are you putting in drills that are going to help build those things into muscle memory as these people are training? So really consider how you're doing seminars. If you're doing seminars, look at the science of pedagogy and study it so that you can understand how to put something in someone's brain and keep it there. I digress. My question to you is, and I think this is a question that needs to be asked more often, if someone came up to you, and let's forget normally adjusted people. I get it. Like, the normally adjusted person does not need to prove themselves, right? You don't need to prove jiu-jitsu works. It's already been proven. You don't need to prove anything to anybody. But let's go to the hypothetical situation that jiu-jitsu is still new in the world, and everybody thinks it doesn't work. If your instructor came to you and said, hey, there's a karate black belt who's coming in, and I want you to fight him, would you be able to take the fight? It's a hard question to ask yourself. And I'm going to submit to you that if the answer is no, you need to train harder. You need to train more. You need to go to more open mats. You need to roll. What are you going to do if they try to kick you? Because I can tell you, just watch some of these videos. Watch Choke. Watch all these documentaries about it. You just eat that kick and you keep going. That's what happens. You basically rush them down, get kicked in the stomach, grab them, drop them to the ground, choke them. And this happens over and over and over again if you start watching some of the old school stuff. But ask yourself that question. Are you willing to take that fight? It's a simple question. Forget about laws and all that. Obviously, I am not advocating for jiu-jitsu versus anything fights. I'm not saying that that's going to happen at my school or any other school. I'm not saying that it should happen. But you should be willing to take it, meaning that you shouldn't be afraid of taking it. Absent of any laws. Obviously, you don't want to set up backyard fights where they're against the law and all that kind of stuff. I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying that you should feel comfortable. What if some random person comes into the school and wants to roll you? Some guy who's never trained before. Are you going to be nervous about taking that roll, that match? You shouldn't be. I submit that if you're a white belt with 4 stripes or more, there is no way you should be nervous about taking any match against any untrained person ever. You're going to be fine. Now, Olympic level wrestler, or maybe even collegiate wrestler, and if you're a white belt, maybe even a good high school wrestler, they're going to give you a hard time. It makes sense that they would. They've got the balance, they've been training longer than you. Think about it, a 4-year high school wrestler has been training, essentially grappling for 4 years. Maybe even longer if they trained, before high school. College, they've been training it for 8 to 12 years. Olympics, 20 years. So yeah, those people are going to give you a hard time. That's not what I'm talking about. And you can see this evidenced by the fact that there's fewer and fewer and fewer super high level guys, super high level jiu-jitsu people specifically, fighting in the UFC. And it's not that there aren't any, of course there are, but there was a time when you had to be really good at jiu-jitsu. Right now, the greatest heavyweight of all time, Stipe Miocic, is a purple belt. Now, could he go to a grappling tournament and pass as a brown belt? I don't know. Maybe. But, the point is, he's a purple belt. But his base is good, his wrestling's solid, his striking is on point, and he doesn't need to be high-level black belt in jiu-jitsu. Okay? Not to win at the UFC. And again, there's rule sets that have guided the UFC to where it is today. I'm not saying that is the measure of all fighting, although I think it's a great measure of your ability to fight. I think if someone tries to pick a fight with Stipe Miocic, they're going to have a bad day. So that's my question to you, is do you think you would be willing to take the fight against the karate black belt, the taekwondo black belt who walks in and says, hey, I want to test this stuff. Let's put on some gloves and go. Would you be willing to take that fight? Comment below, let me know. Don't forget that we always have the gi giveaway going on for the month of December, and 5 Tiny Details is next. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later. Alright guys, welcome to 5 Tiny Details. Someone asked me something about passing the knee shield. There's a million ways to pass the knee shield, but I will talk about some of the problems with it and some of the issues I see when people are trying to pass it. I have Kendall with me helping me out. What's up, Kendall? So Kendall's going to be half guard with the knee shield. The biggest problem here is that Kendall's still very mobile, and he's got a solid structure in my way. His femur is driving straight into me. It can absorb a lot of the weight that you're going to put on it. A lot of times people will talk about coming inside, bending, smashing this, coming in this way, and that's okay, but I can tell you that better guys will start to overhook this and give you real problems with your arm. They'll dig it out of there. So it's not that you can't do that option, it's just that it's fallen out of favor with me personally. So one of the first things that I try to do, rather than go through this, which I think should be your final option, that's not really a good jiu-jitsu option, right? It's not very yielding or flowing or push-pull. It's none of those things. It's brute force. So rather than do that, I want to take away his ability to be on his side. Anytime someone's on their side, they're mobile. So I'm going to cup under the knee, and I cup this knee as well. So both lift and I pinch. Now it's hard for him to get his knee back to the ground, especially because I'm still retaining this leg. If I don't retain this leg, he puts his foot back on the ground and simply puts it back down. Here, boom. And I keep walking sideways. When I'm ready, now I can go into either double overpass here, or into the more traditional over-under pass, and start working that stuff. So that's one way to kill that knee shield, and it's one of my favorite ways if they allow it to happen. Something else that might happen, and this is more of a low knee shield, right? It's like if my body, if this is 0 degrees and this is 90 degrees, we're kind of in between 0 and 45 for this. The next one that I like to do sometimes is, especially if he's maybe a little obstinate or keeps peeling my wrist off of here, or just not letting this kind of stuff happen, and you're getting into the hand fighting here, is backing off a little bit, and then I'm just going to come like this. I'm just going to kind of pin and act like I'm just checking it out. And he might sit up, but I don't have a whole lot. There's a lot of distance for him to cover here. I'm going to take this outside leg, step it over, and then just walk through. It seems like it would be very knee torquey, but it is not at all. You're basically just stepping behind him. So at some sort of pace, that would look more like
And now we're in. Just be careful of guys who are good with Kimuras. They might try to start attacking that as you go through, right? So be smart about that. So the next one I would say that I will do if his knee is maybe a little bit higher, some people like to keep that high knee shield, is I can't just reach in here. He's going to start grip fighting. You're in danger of having your back taken. So rather than doing that, I'm going to grab my own head, almost like our punch block defense, right? Here, and hit him. And now I'm under. And I can either go into the traditional over-under pass, or if I get there, I might switch this grip here and start to stack my way through life. So that's an option as well. So guys, there's a few options for handling the knee shield. I hope that's helpful to you. Alright, so I talked a lot about getting to the over-under pass, and my assumption was you know it. But just in case you don't know it well, I'm going to give you some details on that as well. So once we've gotten to the situation where we're in a good over-under position, which remember, he would not be on his side. Okay, over-under is done when his hips are down. I want to have the over one coming down and through. This prevents him from going back to guard easily. This other one is coming through and cupping. In the gi, you can grab the belt, you can grab a lot of things. Here I'm just cupping his thigh area. So my shoulder is going to drop straight to where, like the center of his body, and my ear is going to pin to the side of his hip. So if we go from the beginning so that there's a little bit of boom. Right here. Now I walk in center. Keep active with this, please. See how he's keeping my leg? That's what people are going to do. So what I need to do is sprawl my hips down, pinching my knees together. Now I can pull it up, and then I shelf it at the end. So see how we're shelved right here? Boom. Come under, and I like to grab the inside of my own leg. That way it's hard for him to get those legs into the game. Now I can bring my knee in, start working up from my underhook, and passing up the body. It's important to me that he doesn't move his legs. So at the end of, and there's a lot of passes that end kind of similar to this, I always recommend shelving their leg if you can. You might even decide to go into a full leg drag to do it. So another way to do this, boom, come in, keep that active please. There we go, boom, kick. You might, depending on how crazy he's being, completely leg drag him to get around. So that's the over-under pass. There's also a knee bar from there that you can research. It's a great pass, high percentage. Hope you like it.